Hi, I'm Michael Bates, and I'm going to be discussing my paper and kind of the through theme that I found, which was the conservation efforts versus urban development and how they can kind of work together. I have to apologize. I'm not feeling the greatest, so I'm trying to record this. So if you hear sniffles or my throat sounds rough, that's probably why. But we're going to go ahead and get into this. So, development versus conservation, which one should be prioritized? I put this picture up here because I wanted to show that in both of these images, we see roughly the same amount of houses. We see the same level of development, but one of them prioritizes the development side, and one of them prioritizes conservation with development. And that's really the theme that we're going to be talking about throughout this entire presentation and kind of what my paper discussed, which is we can continue to develop. We're never going to stop developing, but we should prioritize using conservation with it as well. So my research question for my paper was development and its effects on local ecosystems and why it demonstrates the need for conservation efforts in urban city development in places such as Cape Coral. Uh, so here's some definitions. We just have urban development, which refers to the organizational change that contemplates or is likely to entail the conversion of land generally resulted in a need for services. And then conservation is generally refers to the conscious and efficient use of land and or its natural resources, normally in the form of demarcations or reduced resource consumption, usually from the passage of legislation at the local or national level. So some of the themes that we're really seeing is 20th century, well, really just in general, the conservation efforts that started in the 20th century and onward versus our since the beginning of time, the drive for development and building. The model that I looked at was the Everglades. Uh, Early on into its existence, when they allowed for us to start draining and building it, we actually drained over half of South Florida's original wetlands. They no longer exist. Many animal populations either went extinct or their population have been reduced by anywhere up to 90%. Flora and fauna to this day are still threatened with extinction because of the wetland drainings, and many exotic plants were brought in to drain and to just overall dry out the area, which has resulted in native plants uh, being choked out and is overall just changing the natural habitats we see there. After the Everglades, developers demonstrated a lack of understanding of ecosystem dynamics. It was shown that it is possible to bring it back through the creation of various initiatives and laws that will encourage the proper use and development of the area and allow the land to be restored. So now we try to work to bring back some of that 50% of the wetland that we've done. We have efforts and initiatives to protect the wildlife, protect the fauna. These laws and legislations allow us to stop the massive expansive growth of the development and kind of put it in its place and prioritize the conservation of the land, and then here and there allow development efforts, but it's much more regulated. So my main research area was my hometown of Cape Coral. Cape Coral, having gone back and looked at it, Cape Coral has gone through similar uh, development paths that Everglades has gone through. So I wanted to talk about uh, their kind of connection and how Cape Coral can use the model of the Everglades as a way to bring back its natural ecosystem that is kind of destroyed as it's developed. So, some background is that there's a couple key main points that started the development race in Cape Coral. First of all, was the Civil War. The U.S. government started handing out their land grant through their land grant program, which gave land in exchange for the cultivation of it. This had a massive influx of people, settlers trying to come down to Florida, get in the warm, nice climate areas, settle it. cultivate it, and that started the first big wave, big push of people coming down and trying to just develop the area. On the scale of everything, this was not really that impactful. You could say that uh, it was the basis of what would happen later, but this main instance just got people into the area and got people to learn the area. The major section that kind of uh, has set up Cape Coral for failure and has kind of destroyed a lot of the area was after World War II. Uh, the the Rosen brothers bought a lot of the land down here. They bought 1,724 acres, and they wanted to create a ready-to-build lot in a community that had pre-made roads, all of these things for people to live in. Uh, Now, why would they make this massive investment? And this is because after World War II, many of the veterans of World War II were trained in Florida. They quite liked the warm tropical nature of the area, and they wanted to come back and call it home. So the Rosen brothers cashed in on this opportunity. Well, to meet some requirements, they had to raise the land. So this gave them the brilliant idea of if we're going to raise the land, we need to get the dirt from somewhere. So if we dig millions of tons of dirt and create artificial canals, 3 yacht basins, and 14 artificial lakes, we can say not only do we have ready to build lots that are raised up to meet requirements, but it's also all on waterfront property. So they've completely altered the terrain, terraformed it, and destroyed a lot of the natural ecosystem. The city, with this in mind, continued to grow. They grew to reach about 200,000 people in 2021. It's one of the fastest growing cities in America. But what we're seeing now is because they got rid of a lot of these natural barriers and a lot of this natural ecosystem, it's beset by natural disasters constantly because it lives in Florida. And Florida has a lot of hurricanes. We have the hurricane season, and they have economic problems because of this. This is all compounded by the rapid population growth and environmental economic problems that they created in the past. Uh, So, what were the consequences of this? Cape Coral was placed in a fragile ecological environment that required the eradication of thousands of acres of wetlands, the construction of hundreds of miles of canals. Long term, we can see that losing the natural protection of that filter and these plants that filter and drain water, it allows for less permeable surfaces as they continue to develop, and Cape Coral will more than likely be shaped by an ongoing battle between the forces of nature and the pressure from Cape Coral residents to continue living in their waterfront wonderland. Being from there, people really value that they live on the water. So they're really stubborn people, good people, but stubborn people about wanting to stay where they live. So there is no concept of moving away. So this leads into if they're not going to move away, what can we do next? Uh, we need to involve the public and private spheres. We need to get them invested, get them, first step is teaching the next generation. If we can teach them ways to continue developing, but in a more green economic manner, it can help create, if we involve the public and the private spheres, it can help create people who are ready to build and put conservation efforts first. And the construction sites using green building techniques can develop more socially and environmentally sustainable living spaces for these people. So then we can see that there's not as major push and swing on the entire environmental sphere of their living conditions. So it can kind of try to work to bring that back. So it's not, constantly using your natural area as a kind of beating board. So after you get to your public and private sphere, how can you instill this? Well, you get the governmental integration as well. Uh, You have the government create resilient strategies, including investing in drainage and water management, as well as doing this will prevent inadequate urban development. And overall, we want to see these plans for, instead of urban sprawl, we want to see these cities kind of go up so that we're also not covering more land and just destroying more and more ecosystem. Uh, uh, we integrate disaster preparedness into city regulations and make it an integral part of local development. Many cities have regulations already in place. Where many places fail is that they lack the pressures and the way to actually enforce them so that local, the private spheres, and even governmental contractors can fail on properly developing. So it's all about not only doing the disaster preparedness, but instilling these regulations and upholding them. The natural disasters we see, like we had recently with Hurricane Ian, affect everyone. But notably, when well governed cities have provided the infrastructure and the service they need, we see that their populations are much more capable of fighting it. And it's also healthier and safer for the environments. So, making investments in yourself and with your people is a way to make sure that not only are you keeping the people safe that live there, but you're also, your environment around you is staying safe. Uh, this might be kind of a personal story, but I live out on an island right next to Cape Coral. I'm very familiar with both Cape Coral and an island called Pine Island. Uh, Pine Island is not well governed. It does not have these facilities in place. It's the reason why Cape Coral is trying to integrate Pine Island constantly. Because of that, Pine Island lost easily 50 to 70% of the houses that were on it. It's a tragedy. It's a disaster. It's hard to see. I don't talk about it a lot, but for this, I want to get it out there because I think it's important towards what I'm, you know, I think it's important to get it out there. Well governed cities have requirements for building codes, and they heavily invest in infrastructure. They keep up on it. Pine Island did not have that. So not only did the tragedy affect the people, but now there's entire houses into the into the local waterways because they weren't up to snuff with building code and requirements. We see houses, we see these oil spills, we see these just localized ecological disasters. Cape Coral, when you drive through Cape Coral, they still have water damage, but almost all the houses are still there. People have something that they can come back and rebuild to, uh, which is significantly better than what can be said about the people of Pine Island. So that's kind of a close to home personal story, but when you invest in your people and you invest in your city more than just developing, and you do proper development and you make sure that it's well kept, uh, these natural disasters are still disasters, but they affect the populace much less. It makes it easier to rebuild. So past that, we'll continue on with, like I said, how it affects the people. You have this lack of preparedness. This together with the continued development, it just demonstrates a need for us to have conscious efforts in the public, private, and governmental sphere, uh, to where we need to reassess our expansive thoughts and need to evolve our building practices. Cape Coral, like I said, Cape Coral is one of the 10 fastest growing cities in America. These issues need to be addressed and fixed, or the next major natural disaster, like a Hurricane Ian, or major development project that they put forward, will irreversibly destroy the local ecosystem, and then they'll be clutching at straws. And it will take away, it'll take away not only the natural beauty of the environment, but overall, right now, Cape Coral is at a crossroads where they could really do some work and have their impact on the local environment be mitigated. but that's only if proper planning is put into place. In conclusion, when developers don't have conservation in mind, it results in situations like the Everglades and the early Cape Coral. Uh, but through policy, we can demonstrate the ability to create initiatives and laws that will encourage the proper use and development of the area and allow the land to be restored. Based on that, it shows that places like Cape Coral and many others that are out there that follow Cape Coral and the Everglades models, which were similarly drained, channeled, and completely terraformed with no regard for their future, can be brought back if placed under strict regulation and planning. So, just some research areas, some ideas moving forward, I think would be interesting to add on to this sort of research that I've looked into is that I wonder what the efficacy of outreach programs is. Uh, if we do want to educate the youth underneath us, what are the efficacy of educating them and getting them in? Like the reduce, reuse, recycle program, stuff like that. What's the efficacy of those outreach programs when you get them into schools, get them into younger minds, and have them grow with the idea of conservation and proper development? The other one is that I'm very well versed in the LEED certification and how it creates green building practices. So I wonder if, because they think about not only their impact on the environment, but how the environment impacts the building as well, if LEED certified buildings in areas with high natural disasters, if they have a more likelihood of weathering the storms better. Uh, I appreciate you listening, and this is my research and kind of the layout of what my paper was about. And I appreciate you listening, and have a great day.